And welcome back in to the Skol Purple podcast as we are hopefully behind our technical problems. You know, technology, it's great when it works, and when it doesn't, well, crap. Basically. So once again, Dryce and Carson with you here. Dryce, I'm gonna have you redo everything we already did here.
It's all good. It's all
If you
good.
want, you could go back to the other stream and see the Minneapolis Miracle. We were going to talk about that. And we'll have Bryce, first of all, introduce himself and how he got started with the Vikings into Purple Purgatory, as one Mike Florio likes to say. And yeah, Dryce, wow. You
You're
probably are going
good.
to leave the stream now here.
No, you're good. So
Dry-
I don't know. I grew up, brothers were Vikings fans. You know, I don't know, just loving watching the Vikings. I'd be rushing home from church, listening to the radio. You hear Paul Allen, he's loose. AP's just chugging, and I was just, yeah, I don't know. I love the Vikings. Sometimes I feel like they don't love me back. When I was like 10 or 11, it was like obviously the NFC championship with Brett Favre. And I just cried myself to sleep that night. I think I honestly went to my parents' room and I was like, I can't sleep. So it's been a rough ride, but I don't know. Hopefully we'll get a little breath of fresh air with some new regime with GM and head coach. So
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, before we continue, I remember, you guys had you and a couple of other buddies from high school or college had a little show slash project, I
yeah.
guess you were working on called Porch Sports. Any chance of that making a revival someday here?
I don't know. So it's me, my brother-in-law, his brother, and then just a mutual friend of all of ours. We just been tight since high school. Honestly, it just started. We just would like hang out, sit by the fire, just talk sports, and then we were just on a porch. So we were like, all right, we got to call this thing Porch Sports. We were just wide-eyed, had a big dream, started podcast for a little bit, but I don't know. Kind of life gets busy. Everybody goes different ways, and we still
Yeah.
DM every day. I DM them more than I do anybody else. So still riding. Maybe we'll make a comeback here. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Don't call it a comeback, right? All right, man. Well, it was always fun watching your guys' stuff, and it's always fun watching everybody. Well, most people's stuff in the Vikings realm, I should say. There's always a few people that are maybe not the greatest, right?
Yeah.
Um, but again, we want to thank everybody for joining us here, whether you're watching now or later on. And so, Dryce, the Minneapolis Miracle obviously is one of the biggest and best plays in Vikings history. So, where were you when you saw the moment?
So I was at my friend Cole's house. They're all huge. Like everybody's got their jersey on. We're ready to go. Family made like dip. We were ready. We were ready to go. We were in playoff mode. It was a big party. Um, it's so I was like, um, I was still in high school at this time, I think. So like I wasn't coming by money that much. I work and stuff, but this dude was this Saints fan from like, I don't know, 15 minutes from where I'm from. He was like, Saints are a lock. And I was like, nah, dog, Vikings are winning. So then we're going back and forth on Twitter and he's like, $100. And I was like, oh no, like I don't want to bet $100 on him, but so I was like, I'm not going to back down. So I was like, all right, bet, buddy. So then on top of all of that, I won $100. I don't know how it feels for teams to win a Super Bowl, like the Patriots or like, like perennial organizations, but uh I can't imagine it's better than that. Like we were just going crazy for like the whole night. I was like calling my brothers. I was like, yeah, like we did it, baby. We're on to the freaking NFC ship. But yeah, obviously we got smacked. But yeah.
Yeah, I just it just gets so sickening watching Eagles fans always having to remind us of that every
Yeah.
time the Minneapolis Miracle comes up. It's like, we get it. We didn't beat you guys. This
Yeah.
play does not celebrate you guys. It celebrates us, and then we know what happened afterwards. But you don't have to,
Yeah.
remind us.
I swear for like 2 years, probably still today, you look under any comment, any Vikings deal, you can find one like 38-7, blah, blah, blah. It's like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Stop bugging us, dog. We've been through too much.
Yep, exactly. They won the Super Bowl, and yet they still feel the need to troll.
Yeah.
Like, it's
And us. It's like,
yeah,
don't kick a man when he's
troll
down.
Tom Brady.
Yeah, we've been down for our whole lives.
The only division was the NFC East that Tom Brady has lost to in the Super Bowl. So there you go. That's I still find that interesting.
Yeah, that's wild.
Maybe one of the worst divisions in the last 10 years in the NFL.
Yeah.
But
it's always those weird stats. Even I don't know who tweeted it, so I don't know who to credit with it, but somebody was like, when the Vikings beat the Ravens, they go to like the NFC Championship, and when they lose, they fire their head coach. Clearly no correlation, but stats like that are just like wild. But yeah,
I don't know, man. That sounds like a correlation to me.
That's what I'm saying. We need to schedule the Ravens.
Yeah, schedule them every year, and I guess every year we're firing a coach or going to a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, I think it might end up being the firing a coach more often.
Yeah, I even saw one the other day. It was just going around Twitter. It was like the Dolphins are 0-9 versus quarterbacks without an O in their name, and they're like 8-0 versus quarterbacks that clearly don't matter. But it's like, how the crap does that work?
Oh yeah, that stuff is always interesting for sure. So I don't think you and I have talked so much about the Vikings ever since the whole Kirk Cousins thing. So I'm interested to get your take on Kirk Cousins and what you think of him as a player. I mean, I want to preface everything I say about people on this podcast and all of my shows. I don't have anything against any of these guys as people. I'm just talking about their performance on the field. I'm just talking about what they're supposed to be doing for my team, and I'm not saying, then you get the people that are like, well, they didn't play in the NFL. They didn't play in the sport. They don't know what they're talking about, which, that might be true, but it's also doesn't take too much to see if somebody's being successful or not. Now, getting into the scouting and figuring out like who's good and who's bad, that's not always an easy thing. But anyways, so, I digress.
Kirk Cousins, honestly, I've been like I wouldn't say I'm not a fan. Like when it was like,
give us the cold hard truth
of the league, it was like everybody was talking about it. They're like, where's Kirk gonna go? We needed a quarterback, and like we had went to the NFC Championship with Case, so it's like, oh, that makes total sense. Just the final puzzle piece to all this. Kirk's gonna go there, win a Super Bowl. Everybody rides off in the sunset and stuff. But I was like, not a fan of Kirk Cousins because like he's kind of just, I mean, even his tenure in Minnesota, like he's been who we thought he was, I guess you could say. Like, if you don't like Kirk Cousins, play
the Denny Green soundbite right now.
That's what I'm saying. He is who we thought he was. Like, it's just who he is. And like, if you're an organization that wants to win 7 games, 8 games, 9 games, never win a Super Bowl, but never be worse than that, like, he's your guy. But my thing with Kirk is just like the goalposts are always moving. Like, first it was he's our final puzzle piece to win the Super Bowl, and then it became, he needs an O-line. Like, O-line's terrible. I remember the Bears smoked us. Kirk Cousins' first year is like week 17. I think Akeem Hicks was like in Kirk's lap after like a second, which is not Kirk's fault, but like it's always something different. And even now, I'm seeing people on Twitter that are like, man, like, get an offensive mind in the building, keep Kirk, keep the offense. and like he's an offensive mind away from being finally this elite quarterback that everybody's kind of said he could be these past 9 years he's been in the league. But like, if you would go to Washington and look at his staff offensively, probably the best staff all time, I would say. High insight, we got Mike Shanahan at the helm, Kyle Shanahan at OC. I want to say tight ends was like Sean McVay, and then quarterbacks was like Matt LaFleur. So it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's always something. It's either like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
like DeFilippo's not good enough, which he was bad, but like then it's the O line, and it's like, all right, we need to get somebody else. I don't know. Always something. And it's like, I don't know. The sad reality of Kirk, whether it's like we won more games with Teddy for 2 years and then Bradford and Case Keenum, and whether like obviously Kirk's a better quarterback than those guys, but it just goes to show like when you have like an extra 30 million to spend on, you know, elite defense or stuff like that, and it's like we don't pay Kirk Cousins. The money that we pay Kirk Cousins is to like overcome like stuff like that. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
He's getting paid to not like to have like incompetent O line or like, you know,
He's getting paid to be a top 5 quarterback. And he's been playing, I mean, this past year he was playing in some categories as a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah.
But the previous couple of years, he was maybe average top 10, maybe-ish. But it always seems like at the worst possible moments in games, Kirk Cousins just folds.
Yeah. And I mean, Kirk Cousins I think he's a better quarterback than Carson Wentz. But on the same exact, you'd have games where you'd watch Kirk Cousins and you'd be like, man, Kirk's so good. And then the people that wanted to bring Kirk to Minnesota, they're like, yeah, screw you guys. Like, Kirk's good, all this. Same thing with Wentz. Like, Wentz has games where he looks really well. Then you watch the next game and he, like, you know, drops an egg versus the Jags, and everybody's like, oh, Wentz sucks. And it's like, you know, that's just the reality of who these guys are. It's like some games they're going to be great. Some games they're going to suck. And when you're trying to win 4 consecutive playoff games to win the Super Bowl, you can't really count on them to be that guy day in and day out. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is for sure. Well, appreciate your thoughts on Kirk, and wasn't going to throw you out if you were a Kirk stan. I'll tell you that. So just so everybody's aware, we give everybody a fair shake. So, but the obvious topic at hand right now, Dryce, is the GM, because the Vikings don't have a GM. Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer, all gone. And we've talked about it on 3 episodes of this show, basically. We were predicting it to happen, at least one of them, on the first episode. And then we were talking about the aftermath in the 3rd episode, which we were expecting, again, in the 2nd episode, for at least Mike to be gone. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How shocked were you when they decided to get Spielman out of the building too, or were you not shocked at all?
You know, I think part of like kind of regimes across the league is you're kind of tied to whoever your head coach and quarterback and GM is. So I think like there's a time and place to fire a specific GM or to get rid of a quarterback or to, you know, but like in this specific scenario, it's like just tear it all down. And like any way you spin it, it's going to be hard to like bring guys in for interviews and like kind of say like, so he's going to be here, as opposed to just being like, you got the reins, do whatever you want type thing. But I think Spielman could have been kept at some capacity, but I still think it would have been necessary to bring somebody else in, bring like a breath of fresh air in, and kind of like do something in a way that we hadn't been doing stuff, because whether we were like winning games and having some success, like it wasn't getting the job done ultimately. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good way to look at it for sure. And now we have basically 8 candidates right now. I mean, there are maybe possibilities of a couple others sneaking in maybe for an interview, but I think if I would bet money, I would say the Vikings are going to probably stick to these 8. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but these are the 8 candidates. I'm going to go ahead and list them all, and then I'm going to let you kind of break them down one by one. And I know you said that some of them you're not so as familiar with. And I mean, honestly, a lot of us are kind of in the same boat, I feel like, with these candidates. So we know some of the names, but we at the same time, we don't really know some of these names because they're front office people. I mean, it's not something we spend a lot of time on. So let's go ahead and dive into the names. All 8 candidates. The first candidate is your guy. I know we've talked about him, and that is Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and he is with the Cleveland Browns. He has served as the Browns Vice President of Football Operations since May of 2020. Brandon Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. He was promoted to Director of Player Personnel by the Eagles last offseason. Glenn Cook of the Cleveland Browns has spent 6 seasons with the Browns as an Assistant Director of Pro Scouting from 2016 to 2019 and Vice President of Player Personnel as of 2020. And Monty Ossenfort from the Tennessee Titans, the Titans Director of Player Personnel. He was a finalist for the Panthers GM job last year. Ryan Poles, Kansas City Chiefs, Director of Player Personnel, and also another finalist for the Panthers GM job last year. Catherine Raish of the Philadelphia Eagles, the first female candidate to get an NFL GM interview ever. So that's pretty sweet. Giving her an opportunity, the Vikings are. And then the final 2, John Spytek of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was promoted to Vice President of Player Personnel last May after being Director of Player Personnel for the Bucs. And he's completing his 6th season with the franchise, and he's been in the NFL for a total of 18 years now. And then Elliot Wolf, which I think this maybe is the least intriguing option in my opinion. He is a scouting consultant for the Patriots. He is the son of Hall of Fame GM Ron Wolf, who was in Green Bay for many years and had success there. So the reason I say the least attractive is because not only because he was in Green Bay, and that's honestly not the main reason. The main reason is nepotism. I'm wondering if he has a lot of his job security because of his dad, and maybe that he's earned it. He might have earned it up to this point. And there's probably a good chance that that's true, that he has earned it. But I don't know. I feel like the Patriots have been good even without him. So, initial thoughts on that list, and then we can go ahead and break them down one by one if that's good with you.
So initially, the guys that I would say stick out. Granted, it's hard to find information on these guys, and there's only a portion of interviews you can find. And like, if we could sit down in that room and ask questions, and we'd probably have a better idea. But I mean, on the surface level, or as much as we can find, I would say that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is probably my favorite, and then just a slew of guys, and like a tier under him would be like Brandon Brown, Ryan Poles, and I gotta think. Yeah, I would say those guys are on my list. And granted, I don't know much about the other candidates, so maybe I'm missing something there. But specifically, I guess those 3 I've looked into, and I've been impressed with, I guess, their resume.
I think Mensah for sure. He's kind of more along the lines of that analytics kind of mold. And then, you got Brandon Brown, who's maybe a little bit of a mix of both. He also went to law school. So he's got that in his background. And then Ryan Poles, I mean, he's been He's only 36 years old, but he is
Mm-hmm.
he's been with the Chiefs personnel department for nearly 13 years. Man, imagine getting hired by an NFL team at 23.
Yeah.
Uh, man, that's he has some good ties there apparently. So um but I don't know how much you pay attention to Score North and their stuff, but Phil Mackey he's a big Ryan Poles, and I think Judd Zolgad too. Those guys really love
Dang.
what Ryan Poles is about there in Kansas City. Wants to know what that secret sauce is that got them from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes. Like, why did they think that they needed to make this jump from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes? And voila, it got him a Super Bowl. Alex
Mm-hmm.
Smith was this good. He was good, but he wasn't great. He
Yeah.
wasn't good enough to get it done in the Super Bowl, and that's why they got Patrick Mahomes. And here we are today. Patrick Mahomes is top 2, top 3 quarterback in the league.
I think you'd have a lot of Vikings fans in the state of the Alex Smith Chiefs that would be kind of pounding the table for, like another receiver for Alex Smith. And Alex Smith's a great player and he's had a great career, like awesome quarterback, but I just don't think you can be like satisfied with like, average or just competent play at the position. And something about Poles too is I guess my favorite for the head coaching job would be Eric Bieniemy for a bunch of reasons I think we'll probably get into in a little bit, but I would think that he'd probably be paired with Poles. So I would say if that was like a pairing, I would say that's probably my most attractive. And I know I did see again, I don't know much about these guys, but I did see a picture of Ryan Poles in an interview and he had a O-line mastermind shirt on. And that's like Brandon Thorne and Duke Merriweather. They're on Twitter. Probably like smartest guys O-line on Twitter. I don't know much about O-line. Don't claim to know much about O-line, but they're geniuses. So I think Vikings fans would love the passion about O-line, the ability to scout O-line. Ryan Poles is a former O-lineman, I believe. So, I mean, that'd be a priority for his, I would think. And I think that'd be smart too. So,
is there anybody on this list that you that isn't on this list that you think that maybe should be on this list?
That's a good question. I didn't even think about that one. I don't follow front office a whole lot, but I did not expect Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa to be on the list. I had just kind of followed his come up a little bit and known about him because I thought highly of Paul Podesta, Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, and everybody in the Browns building because they're like
right,
smart Ivy League people with football backgrounds. And, that's kind of the vision that I would try to put in place for my team. So I had known about Kwesi and I just think his story is just like really, really cool. So I didn't expect him and he's probably the betting favorite. So that's pretty encouraging. But yeah, I guess I don't know a whole lot about, I don't know, front office and stuff. I guess I don't follow it. I guess I should say, I don't know.
yeah, it was interesting when we had the rumblings of Louis Riddick being a GM, and then there was is there another? I think I heard the possibilities of Daniel Jeremiah even possibly stepping into a GM role. I don't. We saw how it's worked with Mike Mayock so far, which I haven't been a huge fan of what they've done in LV, but
Mm-hmm.
I think they've, and I wonder how much of Gruden, the effect of him,
Yeah.
maybe played in that. But um, so maybe it could work out. And I'm not saying everybody's going to be Mike Mayock and not pan out, but
Mm-hmm. And I
uh,
mean, even it was rumored that kind of Gruden and Mayock had, I believe this was with Mayock. I'm not completely sure, but they had separate draft boards going into the draft. So I think we've seen with the Raiders, it's been so spotty where they find talent. Like Hunter Renfrow was like a mid rounder for him. Max Crosby was like, I want to say a third or second round pick, but then they whiff on these like Clelin Ferrell and those guys. So it's just I suppose Ruggs. Yeah, that's a terrible situation that hasn't worked out as well. But I would just like to see, that's kind of the same, just the general like thought that I would have with front offices too, is like it'd be easy to point out whose front offices are good and who's not, but it's just hard to know like who's pulling the weight behind this decision and that decision. So that's kind of what I think is hard about evaluating these guys, because who knows if, there's like Quessy or something with the Browns is just pounding the table for this guy, but then, Andrew Berry's like, no, we're not doing that. So I think that's a big part in interviewing as well, just like answering those questions and like yourself, that it's a good leader, they can communicate well, because as much as the GM can do when you got a scout, 150 different D1 colleges and then some D2 and D3 and FCS, FBS, you need to be able to build a, building of like-minded guys who you trust to find talent, and then kind of just like be the mediator for them. So, yeah.
So we talked a little bit about Quessy here. Have you heard much about Brandon Brown and what he could possibly bring?
Not completely, but he still is I'd probably say he's my number two, maybe 2A, 2B with polls. But I mean, I've seen really good stuff about him. Yeah, obviously the Eagles have had kind of a weird, like, past 5 years between winning the Super Bowl with Foles extending Wentz. That didn't work out, but then now they traded him, and future looks pretty bright with 3 first-round picks, a playoff berth, and Jalen Hurts. So, yeah, he's super intriguing for me. Part of what I would want in the new GM too, which it looks to be the vision they're going, is just like somebody that the players can relate to, whether that's a former player or, I feel like that's probably, I think Zim was a great coach. I think Spielman was a great GM, but I think that's probably like the downside of those guys, or something that they don't do well. So I think if, we had a combination of Brandon Brown or Quessy or Ryan Poles, and like say like an Eric Bieniemy, I think that would just make for a real big breath of fresh air in the building, just because those guys can communicate so well. And like a lot of those guys have been in that chair, and yeah. So I'm excited. I think kind of off topic, but I think part of this whole process is just kind of sitting back, taking a step back, and like appreciating the Wills family, because they are good at their jobs, and we get to watch our division rival Bears just have total incompetence at the top of the organization. So like at this point, be fortunate we got them, and we got Rob Brzezinski and a lot of other guys who are like very good football minds that are a part of this process. And yeah.
Yeah. And so my question for you is, you mentioned briefly there like a combination of these guys. Do you think that it's possible to bring both, like more than one of these candidates in and, pay them a little bit extra money for like an assistant GM job, or like a co-GM sort of a role?
I think we've seen that in the past years as well. I don't want to keep talking about Quessy. I just know the most about him, but I mean, even he's an example to where Andrew Berry was I believe, like VP of player personnel, and then Quessy was working directly under him. Maybe, I believe, I'm not sure, but I mean, we kind of see it often where like they bring guys with them. And I know that Glenn Cook is a candidate, I believe his name is, from the Browns. So maybe he's the guy that if we hired either him or Quessy, they take the other guy in and promote him to, VP of player personnel or something like that. But
Be like Moneyball, where he goes and trades the Browns for him.
yeah. Even Moneyball too. Fun fact. So Paul Podesta, he was kind of the guy who was in charge of kind of assembling Andrew Berry and Kwesi and Glenn Cook and all those guys, Stefanski. And he was actually he was the guy who Jonah Hill played in Moneyball. He was in baseball like maybe 10, 15 years ago, but I don't know. I found that really interesting. Well, and similarly, like to Kwesi too, he played basketball at Providence, I believe. So I mean, even to kind of come into a sport with kind of an open mind while you have no bias to anything, you're kind of just learning and kind of sifting through what you believe to be true and not around like elite football minds, I think is something pretty cool too. So
yeah, Kwesi played basketball at Princeton. And yeah, Glenn Cook, he was a baseball player. And he let's see. Yeah, he was drafted in the MLB draft. And he played 34 rookie games, but he also played linebacker for the Dolphins. Kind of a fun fact there. So they got some background in playing, so it's not totally like, oh, these guys are nerds, you know. There's a little bit of bit of the Cleveland Browns have some guys that know a little bit about the game. So I think that's important. And so yeah, I would love that, because not only do you get another voice in there, but the idea of the Wilfs and their collaboration, and we want leadership, and we want people to be open. And, you know, like with Eric Kendricks, what he said about the toxic environment almost that was the Vikings, because Mike Zimmer, you know, he was so, it's this way or it's not happening. And I think Spielman just was like, I don't know what to do, you know, kind of a thing. I don't think Spielman's kind of a lay down the law guy. Okay, Zimmer, I'm done with you. Kind of a guy. I think he just wanted to roll with his guy. I don't know if Spielman would have. I think actually, based on what I actually heard now, I think Spielman was planning to fire Mike Zimmer, regardless of what his job was, and then he walked into getting fired on that day, on Monday. So, which is kind of interesting. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I heard. He said, she said. I know it's kind of hard to pick up, but that's kind of what I had heard, is the Wilfs are like, no, you're out of here too, buddy.
Yeah, he saw the writing on the wall.
And the Wilfs were just like, yeah, like you had said, you know, and we had all heard, oh, well, Spielman's going to take this higher role, and he's going to go ahead and stay with the Vikings and maybe help with the GM search. And the Wilfs are just like, no, we've had enough of it. We're done. We need a new guy. We don't want your eyes on this thing anymore. So, I was interested to hear that.
And he's a great football mind. Oh, yeah, he's a great football mind. He'd be really beneficial to have in the building. But I would say comparatively to like the Patriots this year, when like Mac Jones is like the rookie and like it's kind of his team, but then they had Cam kind of in the wings too. You know what I mean? Just kind of a weird power struggle to where you kind of just got to like cut Cam, even though he's like better than Stidham and Brian Hoyer and those guys. But yeah, I mean, it'd be weird to have kind of voice in your ear who had been kind of running the show for the past 8 or so years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an interesting bunch of group here. Glenn Cook, we kind of touched on him a little bit, and you know, Ryan Poles, I think he's got to be in the running for sure. And then I don't know much about Catherine Raish, honestly. She has got some ties to Canada, it looks like, as well. And so she had been in the CFL with the CFL and the XFL briefly too, it sounds like. And then was the vice president, as I said, of football operations for the Eagles since last May. And then also I think this is an interesting name. John Spytek's got to be up there too, but Monty Ossenfort. I mean, he's been in the league for a while. He spent 14 years working for the Patriots before joining with the Titans 2 years ago, 2020. And so that's another name that is kind of interesting. He was promoted to college scouting director in 2016 by the Patriots before he finally ended up in Tennessee. But that's another interesting name because obviously he was with the Patriots before. But again, it's like how much of that success was more Bill Belichick and all the things he did there too.
I agree. Yeah, it's just hard to know. Kind of, yeah. I'm sure all these. I mean, to interview for this job, to be part of the 0.1% of your profession that interviews for like you got to be smart with football. So, some more than the rest, but I would just think that a lot of these guys are like, good scouts, like good pro scouts, good college scouts. They know what they're doing, but yeah.
Yeah, and another guy that I was interested in but did not get an interview, or at least not yet, is his name from the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh,
is
yeah.
Adam Peters. And actually he's getting looks at some other jobs, but he is the assistant GM there right now with John Lynch. And he is in his 18th season. And he was in 2000. He was formerly with the Broncos. In 2016, he was named the Broncos Director of College Scouting after spending 2 seasons as the team's assistant director of college scouting. And then he got hired by the 49ers. And he's been with them for a couple of years. And actually just last year, just before this year, he was named as the vice president of player, or no, it was named as the assistant general manager. He was, prior to that, was the vice president of player personnel for San Francisco before he was with the Broncos and was a part of a Super Bowl there. So, and I know a lot of that was Peyton Manning too, and that was a name that was interesting to me, but obviously it didn't interest the Vikings enough, or at least not at this point. But I would have liked to seen him on the list, at least in my opinion, but I don't know if you've heard much on that guy, but
yeah, no, I've heard a little bit about him, and I'm pretty impressed with them as well. Even the roster that they had built, that Super Bowl roster, like everything considered, with Jimmy G at the helm, like probably one of the better constructed rosters, probably outside of quarterback in the league. So yeah, I mean, he's probably got a pretty good resume too. And Kwesi must, I think, I don't know if they ever had any overlap there, but I wonder if they even worked together with the Niners too. But that would have been interesting as well.
Yeah, that's right. Director of Football Research and Development for the 49ers before joining the Browns. And he got his first job in football with the 49ers in 2013. Yeah, that's maybe he did have a little bit of time. Maybe he did have a little bit of time. He was named their VP of football operations in May of 2020, Kwesi. So yeah, I think they probably did have a little bit of time at San Francisco together. Dang. So maybe that is a connection. Here we go.
Yeah, maybe that's VP and one or the other. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. It's I think if you could get 2 or 3 of, kind of some new voices, new faces, and like you said, that breath of fresh air in the building, I think that's going to be huge, not only for the current players, but also with a fresh look on scouting, with a fresh look on the draft, with a fresh look on free agency, and a fresh look on this roster. I mean, do these guys think that Kirk Cousins, like these new people, do they think Kirk Cousins is the answer? I mean, and if he is the answer short term, how much longer does he have to continue to be the quarterback? Because I don't think every quarterback is going to play until they're 44 years old. or even into their late 30s. I don't think Kirk's going to play that long. At least maybe not be as effective that long. But
Yeah,
so
I would think that would be a big topic in the interview, but that's another thing where I would love to be the fly on the wall while they're getting interviewed, because as much as I could like a candidate, if he's like, yeah, I'm gonna sign Kirk Cousins to an extension, I probably don't like him so much anymore after that. So
yeah, no,
it'll be interesting. Even to like evaluate the roster will be super interesting, how those guys all go about that, and whether they want to build kind of like from the O line, like trenches out, or whether I would like to see the similarities of the candidates and kind of how they view like team building and kind of their vision with stuff. But yeah, I'd say the list of names is really, really intriguing.
Here's an interesting thing that Dustin Baker put out. I don't know if you follow him or not, but he put this out about an hour ago. Vikings defensive ranking per EPA per play with and without Danielle Hunter. From 2015 to 2019, they were first. 2020, without him, obviously, 25th. And then in 2021 with Danielle Hunter, 5th. 2021 without Danielle Hunter, 22nd. So just something that is interesting to me on how bad this team needs Danielle Hunter. Like, they really need him to be healthy, especially going into next year, and just the impact that he has just on something like that. Like, it maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but I mean, it had a big impact, I think. If you would go back and look at the games, maybe it doesn't have as much impact in the wins-loss column in some of those games early on, but if we would have had him for these last, 5-6 games of the season, things could have been a little bit different. You never know.
Yeah, and I mean, him and Jefferson are undoubtedly probably our best. I guess maybe Brian O'Neill too, but to have a guy like that when we play almost every game in a like a one-score game, like who knows if like one third down sack or one pressure maybe stops a scoring drive and we end up winning or something. And I would also think a Danielle Hunter coach team versus a not Danielle Hunter coach team probably looks a lot different, not only for like Danielle specifically, like the difference that he makes, but just like the attention that he like warrants, because like we got talent on our D line and we didn't get much pressure this year, but I would hope that, I mean, having Danielle with his hand in the dirt probably, gets 2 or 3 O linemen looking his way. And then maybe, like Armand Watts, Sheldon Richardson, Dalvin and Michael Pierce and DJ Wanham, like guys like that can, maybe get like a one-on-one or something and get a chance to win, as opposed to when he's not playing. But yeah, he's huge. I'm sure Zimmer wasn't happy when he hadn't played these past 2 years and the defense kind of looked like crap, but yeah, hopefully he gets healthy.
So Darren Wolfson, Doogie, great follow, great Vikings insider. He tweeted out this afternoon or early evening. He tweeted out that after Jeremy Fowler originally had tweeted, Vikings expected to kick off their GM interviews on Sunday, per source, with Titans Director of Player Personnel Monty Ossenfort among the first to go. And since his team is on a bye because they have the first round bye, the only 2 teams, which I could get into that too, but anyways, get a first round bye in the NFL playoffs. And then Doogie says he hears that Ryan Poles of the Chiefs will be interviewing on Tuesday via Zoom. So,
Nice.
so those are 2 of the interviews at least that are set up. And I don't know if Doogie has tweeted anything else yet today about the search. Nope, that was the only thing, at least lately, that he had tweeted. So, but yeah, that's interesting to keep in mind as we start to get. How soon do you think we'll get get a guy or a gal possibly.
Yeah. I would think ideally they take, a month and spend like 3 days with each candidate, but sadly it's like a business where everybody's trying to get their guy, and their guy is probably similar to or even the same person that we're trying to get to. So kind of got to rush the process, but I would think once one domino falls, you'll kind of just see all the rest of them fall. And from there, then we can probably move forward pretty progressively with our head coach. But I would think within 2 weeks we would know the GM. I don't know how it's been handled in the past and kind of what that time frame looks like, but that's another interesting thing too. Is Bieniemy is the betting favorite for the Vikings job. I think it's like plus 300. Yep. So kind of take that with a grain of salt, but that'll be interesting too, just to kind of, I don't know, see if we could interview him, or because he's going to be like, they're playing this week. And I mean, if they get to the AFC Championship, like they're probably projected to, that's 3 weeks where we're either on pause or we move on with the search. So that'll be interesting. Bieniemy's he's head and shoulders probably my favorite candidate for the Vikings specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a great transition right there. Let's go ahead and get into these coaching candidates now. We've spent a decent amount of time talking about these GM candidates, and I think Catherine. Before we do, I think Catherine Raish is an interesting option as well. I mean, I think all of them are interesting. Elliott Wolf is the least for me. Is there one that would stick out to you as being the least interesting?
I don't know if I could necessarily pinpoint it, but I mean, more so just the guys that are, that I believe to have great communication skills and great player relatability that also happen to be like young. So I would say I probably just outside of polls, Glenn Cook, Brandon Brown, and Adolfo Menza. I don't know how many like intrigue me, I guess. I would be happy with them, and granted, they know more about it than I do, and I could probably, after we hire somebody, react and do research. But yeah, those are the four guys I would say I'd be like pretty enthused by if we hired them. So
yeah, those are some good ones for sure. So let's go ahead and move on to the coaching tree of names that the Vikings have been linked to, and maybe some that haven't been linked to but are interesting. And one of the hottest names in all of the NFL right now, maybe rightfully so, maybe not so rightfully so, is Kellen Moore. And he is the offensive coordinator over with the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm interested to hear your take on Kellen Moore. Do you feel like a lot of his success is from himself? Do you feel like McCarthy's helped more so, or do you think it's just Dallas's offense? Because to me, the thing that concerns me is Dallas's offense for a decent part of the season, like, about a fourth of the season, they kind of just were not good. They weren't very good, and that's not an offense that should be stifling. And they've got so much talent, which, kind of brings me to the Vikings, kind of reminds me of the Vikings in a way. So I guess what are your thoughts on Kellen Moore?
So I would say I'm a big Kellen Moore fan, and I feel like he strikes me as a guy who would probably take a head coaching job too early, probably get fired, and then maybe do it again and probably have a lot of success. I've seen a little bit of interviews on him, but I think I would prefer to have somebody maybe like command a room more and be maybe a more vocal leader. As good as he is hands-on with the offense, like the reality is a head coach probably doesn't do as much of that. Like what makes him a unicorn, probably he wouldn't be able to kind of execute and do in Minnesota. I heard an interview with Dan Campbell, and he was like, yeah, like you think you're going to get so much time game planning and doing this with the offense. And then it's like, you got one press conference and you got this and that. So I think more so I want a good offensive mind who will like implement his scheme and kind of build a good culture that players can relate to and be a good communicator. Because as good as a play caller as he is, he kind of does have the keys to a Ferrari. I mean, their O line's great. Every starter, maybe besides like center, is good. Receivers, although they've been injured, when they're healthy, that's probably the best unit that there is in the league, especially now with Cedric Wilson emerging. And then the running back room, I mean, it'd probably be an argument of whether it's the Vikings running back room, the Cowboys running back room, or the Browns running back room for the best in the league, because to have Zeke as a pass pro guy and just kind of between the tackles and then have Pollard for the change of speed. So I think it's kind of hard to evaluate him. Not that he hasn't overcome much, because he has had seasons with Andy Dalton and, Gucci DiNucci and all those guys. But yeah, I think I would maybe go in a different direction. He wouldn't be at the top of my list if I was the owner, but I also necessarily wouldn't be mad at the hire either, considering guys like Nick Sirianni and stuff get hired. So, we'd be all right with Kellen Moore, I think, but yeah, probably not my guy.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it with Nick Sirianni or Joe Judge, who I
Yeah.
don't think he was on most people's radar before he got hired. I think a lot of people were just kind of scratching their heads like, Joe Judge, of all the other candidates that are out there, like, what are you thinking? And now, if you're the Giants and Eric Bieniemy, who has gotten kind of the middle finger from a lot of teams basically the last few years, because he's been, I feel like, a good candidate the last couple of years, and just kind of gotten that just teams are just like, nope, we're going somewhere else. And people are saying it's, oh, well, maybe he's a bad interview. Doesn't interview well. Well, I don't care if he interviews bad. If he could command a team and he's got a
Yeah.
leadership ability, who cares if he could talk to the media? Who cares if he could talk to people like me? So I don't care. If he could coach,
Yeah.
nobody cares. So, but if you're the Giants, and now that this great job that the Vikings have open, which I think is by far the best job of anybody right now, just based on the openings, I think they're gonna really struggle to get Eric Bieniemy, and they could have had him probably if they would have pulled the trigger on him in the last year or so or two. But
yeah, and I don't know the connections between kind of sort of the pattern that we've seen of the Wills family and the Vikings hiring kind of Andy Reid disciples, but I would think there's some familiarity there, that he'd be comfortable with. And if you don't know, he did coach the Vikings running backs, anybody that listening. So I think he was like with us for 5 years. So I think to have that, I think he's my number one candidate for a bunch of different reasons, but to have that familiarity and like kind of sense of home amidst like your kids going to be in a new school, like it's a new change of scenery, you're making new friends, but and then to have that like sense of home where you're like, oh, let's go get pizza, down at the corner, because like that first month and 2 months of like talking to these guys, having these conversations when they're like formulating opinions on you, I think is huge. But yeah, Bieniemy, I think his coaching resume is deserving of a head coaching job. I think his relatability from being a former player and being like a really talented running back, I think is great. I think like he's young and he's an offensive mind, and obviously Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, but he was in that building, maybe he was pounding the table for him, or he's calling the plays. And we've seen Andy Reid in the past he's upfront and honest about whether assistant of his is qualified to be a head coach. And Eric Bieniemy helps that team a lot. And if he's saying that he should be hired for a head coach job and leave the Chiefs, it means he's probably pretty confident in it, because you don't like losing guys like Eric Bieniemy. But
what are the odds that Andy Reid, after Eric Bieniemy leaves, is just like, wow, it's about time somebody finally hired this genius or something,
yeah,
Like,
I bet he says that. That's the most, I guess, knowledge I would have about Bieniemy is that Andy Reid just sings his praises, and like people have questions about his leadership because I guess he's had some stuff in his background, which those questions will be asked in the interview, and if they feel their answer, I'm sure he'll be hired. But like the Chiefs have been the best organization in football the past 3 years, probably, with like 2 Super Bowl berths and an AFC championship appearance. So, I mean, if he's really does have questionable leadership, like they wouldn't have him in that building. And like if Andy Reid is saying he's got impressive leadership and he's in front of these guys every day, doing PowerPoints and all that. And yeah, from the press conferences that I've seen from Bieniemy himself, he's impressed me a lot. He seems like an awesome guy, and kind of the way he leads and talks about his players, I think vice versa, when his players talk about him, I think is really impressive. But that'll be exciting.
So another one is I'm not a huge fan of this one. I think Viking fans are kind of more excited about this than I am. Some Viking fans, anyway. And that's Doug Peterson. I'm not saying it would be an absolutely awful hire, but it just doesn't do much for me. It doesn't, it doesn't get me excited. And I think I've said this before. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I feel like Frank Reich had a lot to do with that offense and the success they had when they won the Super Bowl that year. And obviously there was some magic involved because Nick Foles played out of his mind in those playoffs. So there was a little magic there too. But Frank Reich, I think, had a lot to do with his success. Do you have any interest at all in Doug Peterson, and just your overall thoughts there?
So I like Doug Peterson a lot, and I think him and Reich. I think Reich was really important to that building, and he was absolutely crucial to that Super Bowl run. But on the same side, I think Peterson played a big role as well. And I mean, that's probably the biggest anomaly of a quarterback that we've seen win the Super Bowl. So as Vikings fans, that's a pretty big vote of confidence for us. But my thing with Peterson is I think he's a great coach, and if you'd end up with the Jags with Trevor Lawrence or something, I'd be really excited about it, and I think that'd be a great hire for them. My thing is kind of just like the way things have been ran. They've been like with Zimmer and Spielman, we've had a good organization and we've won a lot of games, but it seems like they want to go in a completely different direction, whether that's our GM candidates or anything like that. But I just think Peterson, considering like his age and stuff, he's probably too similar to like the Zimmer and stuff. You know what I mean? Kind of an older guy, like been in the league. Like I would think they would want something maybe more like progressive and forward thinking and young and like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So let's go to the defensive side of the ball. And this is a guy that I think 90% of the NFL world was, or maybe more, was shocked that got fired. And that's Brian Flores, former coach of the Dolphins. He is, seems like a really good guy. I think a lot of players like him. I think there's a little bit coming out with Tua in that situation. I think I heard something along the lines of he had told Tua that he wished he had Mac Jones or something, would have drafted him or something. I don't know how accurate those comments are or whatever, but so that scares me a little bit. But
yeah,
I've heard a lot of good things about Brian Flores, and the Dolphins are a young team that I don't know what the GM is thinking there, thinking that he needed to make this change, because the Dolphins, the last 2 years, they've improved quite a bit, and they're still such a young team. I don't know what are your thoughts on Brian Flores?
So I like Flores a lot. Kind of my second team is the Patriots. I'm just a big Bill Belichick fan, so kind of admired him for a while. He's kind of in the same boat as like Gerard Mayo of like coaching Patriot linebackers and just being like a really good guy who players like. I think he's got the qualities that I'd want in a head coach, not necessarily Flores himself, but I just think that's what I'd like in the building is like a guy who's young and fresh and players can relate to and they play hard for him. And I mean, if you asked like the Dolphins players, I guess we saw it on Twitter with their reactions, but they were pissed when they fired him. So it's like that's kind of the energy that I want in the building, and I've wanted that for a while, even though I've been a Mike Zimmer fan. Flores is great, but I think there's an aspect of kind of firing Zimmer, who is kind of a top 3 defensive mind in the league, in my opinion. And I would think that might be echoed by like players and coaches, but I think it would be a weird process to fire Mike Zimmer, who's been like historically a really good defensive guy, and then kind of go and hire Flores. But I wouldn't be mad at it because he's shown he can have success in the league, and he's done that despite Tua kind of being in that same range of like the Kirk Cousins type quarterback, and that's kind of what we're used to. So yeah, I don't know. I would like to see kind of the power struggle of the GM there, and kind of who is making what decisions. And I feel like Flores did his job, but the GM kind of came short on doing his job. So I was shocked to see that Chris Greer didn't get fired and it was Flores who got fired. But I don't know if they're going in the direction of like Watson, or if they want to be in these sweepstakes of like Rodgers and Russell Wilson and stuff. I'm not a Tua guy personally. I haven't been a Tua guy. I want to say I think I called him like I think I said like discount Polynesian Derek Carr when he was coming out. So I'm not a Tua guy, but yeah, I'm curious to see where they go with it, because I feel like something's brewing, and I'm excited to watch that, I guess.
Yeah, I have a lot of hope for the Dolphins, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch that organization over the next several years too. But we talked about Kellen Moore. Now here's some names that you haven't heard come up a lot. Here's a few names for you. I think these might make your head turn a little bit. Maybe not this one too much. Jim Caldwell, former Lions head coach, former offensive coordinator with the Colts. Kevin O'Connell, offensive coordinator of the Rams. And Scott Turner, offensive coordinator of the Washington football team, soon to be renamed, by the way. And of course, he was with the Vikings coaching staff under Norv, his father, for a while. Oh boy, I really don't see that happening. I don't think the Vikings are going to go that direction. But of the three, and I think Jim Caldwell got a rotten deal in Detroit. I think he was turning that organization around, that team around, and Lions were like, nope, it's not good enough. So
yeah, and I mean, I would say Caldwell's probably pretty comparable to kind of what happened to Flores. So they're kind of in the same boat for me. Out of those 3, I probably wouldn't be too happy with all of them, but there is, I mean, Caldwell showed he can win in the league with the Lions, and we're a more well-run organization than the Lions. So I would think it would be fair to expect, everything he did with the Lions, but just more maybe. I guess they had Stafford and we're kind of at a crossroad for quarterback. But yeah, even Caldwell, I like him a lot, and he'd make a lot of sense for a lot of other teams. But I think I still would want to be just a little bit younger. But yeah, he'd be kind of the mold I'd be kind of going for, just of bringing, yeah.
So if you don't get an offensive minded head coach, maybe if you go get Brian Flores or some other defensive mind, Vic Fangio, which I wouldn't be for that either, but then maybe you could bring in a guy like Jim Caldwell as your offensive coordinator, possibly. But I don't know if he would I don't know what his status is with that, but and then Kevin O'Connell. Here's the connection for Kevin O'Connell. He was Kirk Cousins' quarterbacks coach for a year, 2017. So there you go. There you go. But here's the name. Here's a name that I really like. I like Eric Bieniemy. And then my top other two, and these are my top three. Bieniemy is number one, and I think Brian Daboll is number two, and right there is Byron Leftwich. He is like right there for me. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on those two guys.
Yeah. I think Dable would be great. I think he would bring a great offensive scheme and an ability to take a guy like Josh Allen and make him into one of the best players in the league, especially when you kind of consider this draft and not the year you'd want to be drafting a quarterback, but you look at a guy like Malik Willis, and he's kind of got some parallels from Josh Allen in terms of play style. So, I'd be pretty happy with that. And I just part of me wants Dable as well as I want Bieniemy for a lot of the same reasons. I would just like to see how he could kind of like cultivate culture and like lead the team, because I just don't know how much X's and O's he's going to be kind of doing. But yeah, but their scheme, I want both of those guys. That's probably my top two in terms of like wish list for the Vikings, I guess.
What do you think about Byron Leftwich?
Byron Leftwich, yeah. No, same exact thing. I totally forgot about Byron Leftwich. I prefer Leftwich to Dable slightly, but I mean, that's the deal too, where if you could sit in the interview and kind of hear how he transformed Josh Allen and also kind of hear what weight Byron Leftwich is pulling in that building, because we all know Tom Brady's there and Arians is there. So, I mean, yeah, that'd be interesting, because I believe he's pretty hands-on with the plays, and the offense is a lot of what the offense does goes through him. So he's super intriguing to me. On the same kind of token as what I said about Kellen Moore of kind of having the keys to a Ferrari, I think there's a degree of left in terms of just like offensive scheme and play calling. You probably have to grade with a little bit of a curve, because, he doesn't have a hole in his O-line. All those guys are kind of Pro Bowl level guys. And there's not much of a run game, but for a while there, they had Antonio Brown and Mike Evans, who are probably two Hall of Famers once it's all said and done. He had Gronk, which is an Hall of Famer. Chris Godwin, who's a Pro Bowl player, and he's probably going to get paid a nice sum of money this offseason. So, yeah, part of that too. It's I would say Dable has been more impressive just watching from the sideline, in terms of just like making something out of nothing kind of thing. Because for a while there, I mean, like 99% of people said Josh Allen sucked. I said Josh Allen sucked. He wasn't accurate. Everybody was making memes. He was throwing the ball to the receiver's feet. So, I mean, Dable's been he's been incredible with Josh Allen. And in terms of what we've seen from NFL teams the past, 10 years of just drafting guys who are like big, strong, can throw the ball, make all the throws, not a lot of those guys worked out. To see one of the bigger examples of just like a big, strong, tall guy who can just rip the ball, like the coach that's probably largely attributed to it, is probably pretty awesome to have in the building. But I don't know. I would think that Dable is probably connected to what's his name? I'm not sure of his name, but who's that GM that of the Titans VP or whatever?
Oh yes, that would be Monty Ossenfort.
Monty Ossenfort. So I would think, I guess I wouldn't know who Kwesi would be paired with. Maybe Bieniemy, maybe a guy like Leftwich or something. But because Dable spent time in New England as well as Alabama under Saban, I think it'd be fair to expect like somehow he knows Austin Fort or whatever, and they're probably a pairing. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Any of those guys would be a huge breath of fresh air, though. I guess I'd be pretty happy with all of them.
yeah, I think Dayball, you kind of had mentioned it, just his ability to develop Josh Allen. I mean, that to me, in considering that, it's not like, oh, well, Sean McDermott is the offensive guru. He's a defensive guy.
Mm-hmm.
Sean McDermott, and he's a good defensive guy, coach. But that's what impresses me the most with Brian Dayball is he's basically the coach of the offense. Like he's the head coach of the offense for the Bills,
Yep.
and he has developed Josh Allen. And you're absolutely right. Josh Allen, the first year or two, it was like, oh boy, did they make a mistake here? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, the last couple of years, it's been like, wow, this guy is a top 5 talent in the league, top 5 quarterback in the league, top 10 at least, and I think a lot of credit has got to go to Brian Dayball for that. And he's got quite the resume. He's actually been an offensive coordinator a few different times. I don't know if you've looked at this, but he was an offensive coordinator for the Browns 2009 to 2010, the Dolphins in 2011, and then the Chiefs in 2012. Then he was the New England Patriots tight ends coach from 2013 to 2016. Then he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach in Alabama in 2017. And then since 2018, he's been the offensive coordinator for the Bills. So he's a national champion of college football. Alabama won it that year in 2017. So he's already better than Bill O'Brien. So there you go. And then he's also won Super Bowls because he used to be a wide receivers coach with the Patriots, was a defensive assistant with the Patriots even. So that's kind of interesting. He has a little taste of the defensive side too. So
I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think Dable, I didn't even know he was offense coordinator. I just knew. So Eric Mangini was the Browns head coach in 2009, but he's kind of tied to Belichick, and he was a longtime Patriots assistant. So I would think that'd be another connection between him and Austin Ford or whatever his name is. But yeah, he's great, and he's been around so many guys that I would think he'd be, I don't know, kind of well-rounded enough to have versatility of drafting different quarterbacks and just building the system around him as opposed to kind of them fitting into his puzzle. So yeah.
And Dayball's got a degree in economics, so he's knows a thing or two. So
that'd be him and Quezzy.
I think
Quezzy, I guess, at Wall Street or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. The Minnesota Vikings, the new Wolves of Wall Street, or the Wilves of Wall Street.
Yeah, there you go. That was
nice. Oh man, yeah. I think Dayball is like right underneath Eric Bieniemy for me. He is.
Yeah.
He's right up there for sure. So here's another guy that I had thought of as a possibility. He's kind of gone down my list a little bit, but Jim Harbaugh was intriguing to me. He had a lot of success with the 49ers before they canned him. Any thoughts on Jimbo?
Yeah, so I like Jim Harbaugh. I mean, I don't know how many guys are a better head coach than Jim Harbaugh. And but yeah, I mean, he'd be good. We'd win games under him, but I think part of me kind of just sees a little bit of Zimmer in him, of just an older guy who's like undoubtedly a good head coach in the league. But I think what he did with the Niners is super encouraging. Honestly, I said Mond is kind of similar to Kaepernick when he was coming out, and yeah, who knows if Mond's the goods after that whole fiasco for when Kirk had COVID. But yeah, I mean, to take a guy like Kaepernick, who's a second round pick, to the Super Bowl, and to have that defense of Just Smith, Alden Smith, Navarro Bowman, Patrick Wills, and to go with that, plus to have his brother, John Harbaugh. He kind of, I don't know if he necessarily adapted, but he's kind of got an open mind, and it's always a pleasure watching him on the sidelines on a primetime game with the Ravens when Lamar's out there doing his thing, balling, and he kind of walks over to the sideline, and then John Harbaugh is like, "Do you want it?" It's like 4th and 2. He's like, "You want it?" And then Lamar's like, "Yeah." So I mean, I think that kind of relationship. So that's John Harbaugh, not Jim Harbaugh, but I think that's something that the Vikings kind of hadn't had because, I don't know if Zimmer was necessarily Kirk Cousins' biggest fan. So I guess that'd be kind of refreshing to see, just kind of acting together as a team and stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't be enthused with it, but I think he does a lot of things well.
So 2 other names I've got for you, and then I'm going to ask you if there's anybody I left out that you're interested in. The first name is a guy that's been an NFL head coach before. Well, 2, actually, both of them have. But first of all, with the another defensive-minded head coach, Todd Bowles. What do you think about Todd Bowles? Do you think the last head coaching job with the Jets was pretty telling, or do you feel like the Jets didn't give him a fair shake with the roster they had built? Because I think he's done a pretty decent job in Arizona at times.
Yeah. No, Todd Bowles he's perfect for what I'd want. Ideally, I think I'd want an offensive guy, but if Bowles is able to come into an interview and say he's got so-and-so on his staff that's going to be his OC, then, maybe I would hear that out. I think players love playing for him. He's like an intense guy who always has good defenses, it seems like. Even with the Jets, he pretty much on the same kind of, like, pretty much what Brian Flores did, had an elite defense and won more than the Jets or the Dolphins should win, but inevitably got canned because he didn't have a quarterback. But yeah, I would like him a lot. If we choose to go defense, I think my list would start with probably Flores and him right at the top. But yeah, I mean, we saw him just as recent as last year, build a defense that was just like incredible during the playoffs. And I mean, we've seen weirder things happen in the last 20 years of a defense just playing their tails off and somehow just kind of carrying the team to the Super Bowl. And yeah, so he's a good coach. And I think if you could get him a quarterback, he could have as good a chance as anybody to win it all, at least among the candidates that we're talking about right now. But yeah, Todd Bowles would be good. Who was the other one again?
And the other guy has been coming up with all kind. There's been tons of rumors about him, and a former head coach of the Oakland at the time Raiders, and that is Lane Kiffin.
Ooh, I thought you. Oh no, I thought you were going to go Dennis Allen because he had been with the Raiders prior. He had been head coach of the Raiders, but yeah, Lane Kiffin. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be a big Lane Kiffin guy, but honestly, as much as I just got this hopeless romantic with the Vikings that hopes we can hire this coach that's going to win the Super Bowl and GM, in all reality, it's probably going to suck. And Lane Kiffin would be probably the funnest to watch suck because he's pretty funny and he's a good interviewer and stuff. So yeah, if you told me we ain't winning the Super Bowl the next 3 years, I don't know. Lane Kiffin's as funny as the next guy. Might as well be with Lane
Kiffin as the helm.
Yeah.
And then another guy I thought of, college coach, is Matt Campbell, who supposedly the Vikings maybe had interested in bringing in. To me, Matt Campbell's a college coach, and he does a really good job at the college level. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the same with Lane Kiffin. I think they're just good college coaches. That's about all I would say about both of them.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Urban Meyer is not a good human being, but we've seen that jump made within the past year from college to NFL, and the struggle of trying to hire a staff that's kind of acclimated with NFL players and personnel, as opposed to hiring the guys that you're kind of familiar with and worked with at the college level. And yeah, that experiment didn't work out. I suppose there's been some in the past that have, but I don't know. I love Matt Campbell for Iowa State. I guess I'll say that. But I mean, even if he were at, kind of an Ohio State or something, I think it'd be tough. But yeah, he's a great guy, and he built a great staff, and players love him. So for Matt Campbell's sake, I guess, and Iowa State's sake, I think he's a phenomenal head coach.
Yeah, and then two guys I had mentioned are two guys that I would say are candidates within the organization. First one is obviously Andre Patterson, who's been with the Vikings for so long as a defensive line coach, and he's done a good job. A lot of players seem to like him, and he seems to know what he's doing a lot of times, even though the defensive line hasn't been as good the last couple of years. And who knows, maybe that's somewhat on Zimmer too. But what do you think of Andre Patterson?
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a perfect world, um, I don't think Patterson had crossed over with like Bieniemy in their time with in each of their times with the Vikings. I think Patterson maybe got here in like 2012, but I think in a perfect world, he's the defensive coordinator of our either Eric Bieniemy or Brian Dable or Leftwich coach teams. Whether he'll be happy with that or not, or whether Bieniemy will want him on his staff, or so I think that'll be interesting to follow. I think the guys in place, whether it's Wilfs or Rob Brzezinski, I think they respect him a lot. I think the players respect him a lot. So I think you want to keep him around. But yeah, that's always an interesting dynamic of like you finally make it to your dream job and somebody kind of tells you got to keep somebody and so. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. But yeah, if you told me we had Bieniemy or Dable, preferably Bieniemy for me, and they kept Patterson for defensive coordinator, I'd be thrilled, because we've even seen the Packers have success this year with Jerry Gray, who was our D-backs coach for a minute before that with Zimmer. And, he had success with that Packers defense, which has talent on it, but they fought injuries between like Jair, I want to say like Preston Smith. So, yeah, I think that defense has been way better than anybody had expected them to be. And I think you could largely attribute the defense for why they're, 13-3, as opposed to maybe like winning 9 or 10 games. So, yeah, I think Patterson would be great for a defensive coordinator, but as a head coach, I don't know. Maybe it would be a breath of fresh air for Zim, but I think Zim's kind of a unicorn when it comes to like scheming and kind of defensive strategy and stuff. So I think it would be interesting to kind of fire that guy and then hire Patterson. Yeah, but
And then another name that's been around for the Vikings for quite a while is Rick Dennison, senior offensive advisor this past year, and maybe he had more of the offensive coordinator role than people maybe think, based on some other things I've heard. But and then, so what do you think of Rick Dennison? And then also, there's quite a few members of this coaching staff that the Vikings have that I would love to see them keep. Andre Patterson being one of them. Keenan McCardell, would love for him to be back as the receivers coach. Kennedy Palomalu, would love to have him back. And there's a couple others as well. But what do you think of Rick Dennison?
Yeah, so I think Rick Dennison has done a good job assembling talent to the O-line. I would say all 5 spots have guys who are athletic and capable maybe of being good players, whether that's Bradbury or Darisaw or Oliudo. But I think if we were to go that route and hire O-line coach, I think I might prefer like a Bill Callahan or something up who has worked under Stefanski and in the Browns organization now. But yeah, I mean even a Bill Callahan, he's pretty old too, so maybe like to see somebody more that's kind of good with players and all that. So
Is there any names that I missed that you are somewhat interested in? That I know Nathaniel Hackett, the Packers offensive coordinator, is interesting, but is there any way that the Vikings would even get an interview with him is the next question.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Again, same thing with kind of same dynamic with Leftwich. It's kind of hard to know who pulls weight in an offense that has Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur in it. So, I mean, that's another thing where
and Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones and
so I wouldn't be too happy with that, I guess. But yeah, I guess that'd be interesting too. The beauty of this whole thing is I hope we hit a home run higher. And I think we will. I think the Wilfs have given us every, reason to believe that they're good with this process and they're going to hire the right guy, maybe aside from like a Leslie Frazier. But I trust that they'll make the right hire. But if they don't, say they hire like Nathaniel Hackett and he sucks, I mean, it'd be a great year to suck considering, like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young are eligible the next year. So I think any way you spin it, it'll benefit us because whether you like Mike Zimmer or not, I have a hard time seeing a Mike Zimmer coach team win maybe less than like 5 games, just because he's good enough. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. I think it would have been so nice if the Vikings would have been in this position a year ago with the draft class at quarterback that was coming out last year. And then it's this year and it's just like, oh, yikes. It's like that was honestly one of the better draft classes at quarterback last year. Like you put it up there maybe with the Andrew Luck draft class, maybe, I don't know, but it's just come down significantly this year. And then next year it'll go up a little bit again. But man, it's not a good year if you're looking to draft a quarterback. And I'm not saying there's not intriguing guys. And I'm not saying there's a guy that won't pan out and be a good quarterback and who knows, maybe be, the next Aaron Rodgers, be the next Patrick Mahomes, whatever. But from the surface level, it doesn't seem like this draft has a lot of good talent at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and with that too, I think guys are pretty hesitant to kind of tie their wagon to a quarterback because, I mean, ultimately we've seen it's been a theme the past, 10, 20 years, but we've seen the past, month that like Vic Fangio's got a great defense and a great run game and they got talent at receiver and at tight end, but like ultimately he didn't have a quarterback. Brian Flores, like his players were playing inspired. He had a good defense, kind of had a revolving door offensive coordinator and kind of quarterback with Fitzpatrick and Tua and a bad O-line and a bad run game. But ultimately he got fired because, he couldn't find a quarterback. I think Chris Ballard was quoted as saying a couple off seasons ago when he had been off one season with Brissett and one season with Rivers, he was like, you got to know if this guy is going to be good or not, because ultimately if he's not good, you're going to lose your job. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether they kind of pursue a quarterback or not, because I think a lot of fans would be, the first ones outside of US Bank with pitchforks if, we draft Malik Willis and he sucks, but I'd rather go down swinging than not swinging at all. But
Yeah, that's right. And I think the Vikings have gotten into such a comfortable position with Cousins where they're like, before this past year, and I guess sort of 2 years ago when they drafted Nate Stanley, but this past year they were just kind of like, okay, Kirk's contract's coming up. Maybe we can't re-sign him, and maybe he's just going to be too much, or maybe we're going to just admit failure with the Cousins thing. I don't know what Rick's thing was, or if they just wanted a backup, but it's almost like this panic button sunk in for Rick Spielman with the quarterback position this year.
Yeah.
Like I think with drafting Mond, and I think the Vikings really should have made it more of a priority to get a backup quarterback anyway, and possibly be developing him underneath Cousins. That could have been huge. Like if you would have done that, like even after his first year or two, to have somebody developing underneath him and have somebody that can come in and win you a game, like an important game at Lambeau in week 18, week 17. And we didn't have that. We had Sean Mannion. So, and don't even get me started on that whole thing, but it's like, it's so frustrating. The Vikings put zero stock into the quarterback position after they had Cousins, and I think that was kind of there was multiple positions, Dryce, that the Vikings were like, okay, it's okay if that position's not totally okay, like the weak side linebacker position for the Vikings. Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, then who? It was basically how the linebackers have been, and then the offensive line, you got a couple of staples in there, and then you throw out Ali Udo, which, I don't blame Ali Udo for what he's done because he's been put in a really tough situation. But that's Rick Spielman's fault, and that's Mike Zimmer's fault for not realizing that they needed to spend more draft picks in getting that right guard position figured out. And the center position, Garrett Bradbury has just failed pretty badly, even though there's some guys that still love Bradbury, Chris Collinsworth being one of them, but who doesn't Chris Collinsworth love? So, yeah, I'm just kind of curious to hear your take on the failures of the last regime, and what are your vibes with the current roster too?
Okay, so I would say my problem with the last regime was that I guess like initially they extended Cousins, and I feel like everybody kind of saw the experiment, and the product on the field was that we made the playoffs once and it didn't work, and then they decided to double dip. So I mean, yeah, it probably cost them. And if they ended up, drafting to Justin Fields this year, or maybe even like a Mac Jones, yeah, they're probably still, working in Minnesota and they still have their jobs, but that's not the case. So yeah, I think especially considering the inability to find a good O-line and a good quarterback, I guess you should say, and then just kind of a long-term offensive coordinator. I just think it's like you couldn't find a quarterback, which sucks. And I think there was ways that we could have had a good quarterback in Minnesota under Mike Zimmer, like a great quarterback. But it's just so hard when, every year either you're firing your offensive coordinator or he's going to be the head coach somewhere. And then on top of that, your O-line sucks and all these things. Like, for a quarterback to survive that, especially a young quarterback, when a lot of those guys don't end up panning out, I think that's big. So that's kind of partially too why I'm okay with letting Zimmer and Spielman go, just to see what the next regime has, because I'm hoping, like, first and foremost, they prioritize the O-line, and we have a consistent offensive mind who's going to be in there day in, day out for however long, until he's fired. So just like familiarity and certain stuff just to like kind of nurture the young quarterback. And I suppose my vision for the Vikings, in a perfect world, I think we hire either Quessy or Brandon Brown or any one of those guys. And then I think it would be smart of us to trade Cousins, depending on what that compensation would be. Maybe eat some money if we have to. That's fine. I don't think anybody would say that we're in a spot to compete next year. And then go get a guy like Jameis Winston to be kind of your bridge guy, 1 year stopgap, and then he'll have ability to kind of make all the throws so you can still evaluate talent on the roster. But get a guy like that, maybe draft like a Malik Wills, and kind of see what happens. Kind of at every point in leadership in the building, make just a total contrast in what we had before from Kirk Cousins, who's making just terrible looking steaks on the grill, and Mike Zimmer, who's old, and he coached Deion Sanders, just super old, and then Rick Spielman. So maybe go younger and go more relatable, and get like Jameis, who's a hard worker. Ryan Fitzpatrick is on the record saying Jameis asked him what he can do to become a better quarterback, and Ryan Fitzpatrick said sometimes you just got to go home, because Jameis had been spending so much time at the facility and studying film. I think that's a habit that you'd want your young quarterback to have. I think he's a great leader. It's big hypothetical because a lot of stuff needs to happen, but I think he'd be great, and he'd be a good bridge guy. He'd be a good veteran to come in and kind of take a quarterback under his wing. And then as far as head coach and GM, I think Bieniemy would be a great hire. He's been here in the building. He's a good offensive guy. He's worked under Mahomes. He's got experience doing that. I think players would respect the fact that he's been to AFC Championship or Super Bowl the past 3 seasons. And I think it was rumored last year when he was kind of assembling a staff that he was ready to bring in Tim Kelly as his OC, which was the Texans OC from this year. And you can attribute a lot of that to Pep Hamilton, and he did a hell of a job. But ultimately, Tim Kelly deserves some credit too. And what's his name? Doggone dude with the long neck for the Texans, that young Davis Mills. Yeah. So like nobody suspected Davis Mills to be good, and honestly, he showed a lot of signs of promise, a lot of signs to why you should probably keep him as your starter next year. So I think if you could get that production out of Davis Mills, who knows what you could get out of like a Malik Wills or a Carson Strong or any one of those guys, depending on who the new GM would like. But and then in a perfect world, we keep Patterson as our DC, and see what happens from there, I guess.
Is there anybody in particular in the organization that you feel, or on the team, I should say, that should be traded this offseason, or do you feel like we should run it back with a number of our guys? Anthony Barr's a free agent. Do you want to see him back? Do you want to see him leave? Where do you stand on some of the other guys on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, any veterans that have any sort of valuable play left, I think you probably have an honest conversation with them about what the next 3 years are going to look like. Probably not winning as many games as we had, or, committing to a rebuild and everything that comes with that. There's certain kind of Ring of Honor guys like Harrison Smith that, regardless of whether it helps the operation of the team or not, I'd probably just like to see stay in purple, because someday his jersey's probably going to be hanging in the rafters or whatever. So maybe keep those guys around. Daniil is a big question mark. Kind of just depends on what you could get for a lot of those guys, I suppose. If somebody calls you and offers you the Laramie Tunsil trade for Daniil Hunter, I mean, I think you'd be dumb not to accept it when you're going into a rebuild, especially looking at what it takes to go up and get a quarterback sometimes. So I would say evaluate everybody and kind of outside of maybe your young core of, Jefferson, KJ Wright, Smith Marset, Irv Smith, Conklin, you young guys on the O line and your young guys on defense, kind of just making everybody available, being honest and vocal about telling them that, like, we're probably not going to win a Super Bowl next year. And if they want to, go check that off their bucket list or try to do that, then, grant their wish and wish them well and, welcome them back someday. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think because they clean house with the GM and the head coach, I would think that their mindset would be to get rid of Kirk Cousins, but who knows? So it'll be fun to watch. Just a lot of different things.
Yeah, this is, and Chandler, one of our other guys that's been on, he has put it so well. This is probably the most important offseason in Minnesota Vikings history because you just came off a regime that you thought was going to take you to the promised land, and they did some good things. They did some really good things, but just couldn't get you over the hump. They just couldn't ever seem to figure it out. So this is why this is such an important offseason, because you thought the last team, you thought the last guys were going to finally be the ones to get you there. And now with everything going on, it just seems like this is such an important offseason. Like it's easy to say in the moment, but I think if you look at throughout the course of history and how things have gone and how the last regime ended, I think this is so critical for the Vikings to get this right and hire the right GM, hire the right people, hire the right coach, and try and make a crack at this. Try and make a run. But I agree with you. I think the vision's got to be beyond 2022, because even if you are competitive in the sense that you make the playoffs, because I don't think there's any chance the Vikings are winning a Super Bowl next year. And I think any Vikings fan that thinks that that's possible should probably really reevaluate things. But I think they could make the playoffs and maybe win a playoff game next year. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities, but I think anything more than that is not going to happen. And I think honestly, it wouldn't surprise me too much if it's another kind of an 8-8 type of a season, 9-8, whatever kind of a season next year for whoever the new coach and GM are, just based on so many holes to fill. I mean, the offensive line, you have to fix that. You've got to somehow raise a bottom 5 defense, bottom 3 maybe even defense that was last year for the Vikings. You got to somehow get that up to, at least average. And if you have Kirk Cousins as your quarterback, probably top 10, because the thing with Cousins is, in a perfect world, like you had said, with a perfect world, I think if the Vikings had the perfect roster, perfect defense, perfect everything, yeah, you probably can win with Kirk. But unfortunately, that's not how it's usually going to work out. There's always going to be one piece of your team or one part of your team that you're not going to be able to put as much into, whether that's financially or whether that is draft pick wise, wherever it may be. But I think that's what's made some of these teams so great, like the Chiefs and the Patriots. They know which parts of their team that they need to invest in the most. Like the Patriots, they hardly invest a thing in the running back position. If you've noticed that throughout the course of the years. And I think that's kind of been the same thing with the Chiefs for the most part. They've gone pretty cheap at the running back position, and they've been successful at that. They've been putting all their money in all these other places, and they've been successful. They've been good. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. And I am a firm believer in running backs are very, very expendable. I mean, there are so many good running backs. If you have a good offensive line, you could plug a lot of people back there. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
so, but that's just my 2 cents worth.
No, I get it. And even Kirk Cousins too, kind of your point earlier, like honestly, I think if you put Kirk Cousins on that 2019 Niners roster with Shanahan, like I think they win that Super Bowl because I think he does everything that Jimmy G does. And I think he hits Emmanuel Sanders on that deep ball that would have been a dagger. But I mean, that's such an anomaly for like a Kyle Shanahan coach team to have like, the defense they had and the talent they had. So yeah. I mean it wouldn't have worked with Zimmer. And do I think that Kyle Shanahan's just, waiting around US Bank Stadium or the next Kyle Shanahan is? No.
Oh
So it's like
man.
at this point, yeah. But I mean, I'm anti Kirk Cousins, so I can understand if you're pro Kirk Cousins. I can hear your argument, all that, but not you personally, just the masses of Vikings fans. But
The Kirk
I don't want
stands,
to
the
pull
Kirk
receipts, but I was
Crusaders, all that.
yeah, I was I was pro that 2017 offseason that we signed him. I believe it was 2017. I was like huge Lamar, and I was like, we got to draft Lamar and sign Teddy to a prove it deal. Granted, hindsight is great on that, but I've also had crap that I've been way off on. But I just think that's where this team could go, and I think we're close to that. So I just think it's
So I want you to think for a second about pre Teddy Bridgewater injury. Just think about how different this regime could have panned out had Teddy Bridgewater not had that horrific knee injury.
yeah.
Like, just imagine the amounts of money that they would have saved by not signing Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And Bridgewater, he would have wanted a good deal, but he wouldn't have wanted the money that Kirk's making now.
Yeah.
And so, man, just imagine that, and having the ability to go and sign guys that you wanted to sign. And yeah, it's, to me, I think the regime could have turned out quite a bit differently had the quarterback
Yeah.
not been a problem. But because I think that's what the dividing point was with Spielman and Zimmer, and all indications point that way as well. So the fact that we are unfortunate to have Teddy with his injury, but man, that
Yeah. No.
I was so, I think we were
I
all in that
love
same
Teddy.
boat. Yeah, we loved Teddy, and we were just all devastated when that happened. I mean, man, the
Yeah.
guy nearly lost his leg, and so
I
it's,
mean,
yeah.
if you watch like you'll find if you'd like bust my door down at midnight, there would be some nights where I'd be sitting there watching Louisville Teddy Bridgewater just balling on the field. So I was so sad, like when he got injured, and then when he left, Diggs was another one of my just favorite players, and like I was very sad when we traded him, especially with him being like the focal point of the miracle. But I just think it's exciting. On the same side of the thing, it's exciting to see, to have a new regime, to have an opportunity to pick their Teddy Bridgewater, and hopefully he doesn't have a catastrophic freak leg injury, and because things were trending upward, and ever since Teddy got injured, we kind of had just put band-aids on whether you think Kirk Cousins is a band-aid or not, like he was the final puzzle piece that they said. So like it was Bradford, and then it was Case filling in admirably, and then it's Kirk. So yeah, I think it'll be really exciting to have new staff, new GM, new scouts, all of that, and for them to pick kind of their Teddy and kind of go with it, because at that point in time, probably off of that 12-win season when we won the North and we lost to the Seahawks and Blair Walsh missed that kick. Sorry for bringing it up, but up until that point, I mean, the future for the Vikings was like booming. I was like, I think we're gonna win a Super Bowl right now. And then, I mean, in typical Vikings fashion, it just obviously hasn't gone that way, and so much stuff has happened. But yeah, I want to get back to that same excitement that I felt, whether it was like irrational or not. I was like, we got Teddy, we got Zimmer, like Splin's the GOAT. We just came off drafting like Teddy and like C-Pat and like Harvin and AP. Like, we're freaking balling. We're set up for the future. Like, that's a fun feeling. And that's why this offseason is so exciting for me, because I think everybody had opinions on Zimmer and Spielman and Cousins and all those guys. And, the last like 4 years has just been kind of this toxic cycle of like, Zimmer has a good game plan, and then the Zimmer stands do a victory lap, and then our defense gets toasted, and then they're all like, fire Zimmer, I told you. Cousins plays good, and they're doing it. So it's just been like, I'm excited to hopefully, it'll never happen, but hopefully just get everybody on the same page, kind of. Everybody cheering for, you know what I mean? Seems like everybody's always freaking debating something or doing something. And it's like, dude, just support the dang team, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. I get caught up in it sometimes, I admit.
No, I do too, but
it's frustrating, but I think we're all in the same boat. We want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl in our lifetime, but it's we'll see if that dream gets us. We'll see if we get any closer to that dream thanks to these hires this offseason. But
I
Dryce,
hope so.
hey man, it's been so much fun catching up with you. You and I haven't seen each other since I don't even remember when. So it was good to catch up with you, and hopefully we'll be able to get you on multiple times on the
sweet.
show. And it's I think there's just so much speculation right now, which is fun because we haven't been able to really do this too much other than, the normal, who we're going to draft, which is awesome to think about too.
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from the draft, but the whole idea of the newness that this could bring, and, the idea of possibly getting some new eyes in there to look at this from a fresh perspective. And maybe not be a Madden GM where you trade everybody, but trade all your guys to get draft picks. But, maybe a mix of that where you're like, okay, we've got depth at receiver, maybe we do trade Adam Thielen and use that pick to draft another receiver, I don't know, draft somebody else. I don't know. Just things like that. Like, that was the thing I think with Rick Spielman that upset me the most, and I talked a little bit with Chandler and Chris about this, is he just never made trades outside the draft or unless a player was disgruntled in the Stephon Diggs case. So that was the part that probably frustrated me the most, other than the offensive line and quarterback problems, obviously, with Rick and that, or when he would panic, like with the Sam Bradford thing, or the let's trade a 4th round pick for Chris Herndon this year thing too. But
dude, and the Sam Bradford, I want to say it ended up being the 14th overall pick, and the Eagles took Brandon Graham or something like that. Anyways, same draft that Mahomes, in typical Vikings fashion, we trade 1 year of Bradford, maybe 2 for, we're 2 picks away from Mahomes or Watson. This makes me upset thinking about it. Just cultivating all these sad memories.
Derek Barnett was who they took.
Yep.
But let's see. 2017 first round draft. I'm interested to see this now.
Yeah, and if we don't trade for Bradford, we probably lose quite a bit of our games, at least far more than we did. And I mean, then we got a chance to luck into like Mahomes or Watson. Hindsight with Watson isn't good, but Mahomes is like probably going to be one of the best of all time. But yeah, sucks.
Oh, yeah. There was a guy by the name of Marlon Humphrey that was taken 2 spots after the Eagles took Derek Barnett, which that was also Derek Barnett's like, he's all right, but
Yeah.
if they could look back now, Jonathan Allen is another one, Adoree Jackson, OJ Howard, Garrett Bowles, Jared Davis, Jabril
Yeah.
Peppers, Tack
I don't even-
McKinley,
I
David
don't even
Njoku.
think Bradford's still playing, is he? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. And then here's a good one. Here's a big one right here. Ryan Ramczyk, 32nd
Oh.
overall. And then TJ Watt, also another one there.
Nice.
Linebacker that went 30th to obviously Pittsburgh. So, and then early in the second round, Buda Baker. Oh man, this is
all for
just. Why did I do this?
Fun year with Sam Bradford. I was gonna tell you not to, but I was kind of curious, anyways.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, Sam Bradford's gonna put us over the hump. I tell you what, that's.
Golly.
I mean,
and he was fine. He was all right, but it's like, you suck for 1 year. Like, you got a free pass to suck. Your quarterback just got injured. Wait for him to get better. And meanwhile, look at this cat from Texas Tech or Clemson. Like, you'll probably be able to draft him. Like,
Yep.
piss me off.
Oh, man. The life of a Vikings fan right there for you.
It's miserable.
But, there is hope, right? There is hope that there may be a chance that someday we're looking at that Lombardi trophy and the purple and gold is flowing through the air. And, man.
I'll say this. If we win a Super Bowl, I will drink an unhealthy amount of beers. Right. I'm probably look to hit 20 somehow. It's going to be way bad. I'm going to be bad. It's going to be bad.
Oh, man. It'll be a fun celebration. That is for sure. All the miserable games, all the heartache, all the heartbreak coming to an end, coming to a culmination in a Super Bowl championship. That's what we're wishing. That's what we're hoping for. So,
yeah.
Well, Dryce, hey, again, I'm doing the whole Midwestern thing of, well, I suppose, and now here we are still talking for another 5 minutes. So, but we're going to go ahead and wrap up this time. And we really appreciate you tuning in, whether you're on the live stream now or we're earlier, or if you're going to catch it later on. We really appreciate you joining us here. The Skol Purple Podcast, episode number 4. Thanks for joining.